Welcome to the Canary Cast, the official podcast of Mr. Canary Company. This podcast was born from our team taking notice of the fact that simple things carry unexpected power. After 30 years in business, we've learned that every big story starts out small. Our own big story started not just small, but on accident. We're going to share how a simple bird feeder, created by a Marine veteran dad as a side hustle, was resurrected by his two daughters to become a social enterprise which employs people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, not by giving charity, but by giving jobs to help our employees transform their lives for the better. My name's Nathaniel Odell, and I'm the director of Mr. Canary, a social enterprise of the Arc of Greater Boone County, based in Lebanon, Indiana. It's my pleasure to be your host. Each episode of this podcast will offer a genuine human take that deepens your appreciation for the lives, stories, and mission behind something simple, something like a bird feeder, while showing you how everyday choices can help people thrive and communities change. Mr. Canary's been in business for 30 years, so why is a bird feeder company making a podcast, and why bother making one now? Let me take the why now question first. Customers and fans of Mr. Canary are always surprised by the scale and the depth of the Mr. Canary story. But brick and mortar retail shelves in 2025 might be the absolute worst place for storytelling. The vast majority of people don't read product packaging anymore, to the point where I'd say something like 60% of Mr. Canary customers have no clue whatsoever that the products they're buying from us are genuinely empowering American workers with disabilities to build better and more independent lives for themselves. That's a problem, and it's a problem we need to fix if we're going to keep expanding our purpose and our impact over the next 30 years. So, why a podcast? Because this format is perfect for sharing our story with our customers, our fans, and with the wider world in general, in a way that product packaging and even social media can't. This lets us tell our story, which you can listen to on your timeline. Press play and press pause as your busy life requires, but as long as you keep coming back and pressing play, eventually you'll understand just how awesome our business and our impact is for so many incredible human beings who are all too often overlooked. The Mr. Canary story is one that I personally fell in love with, and I've devoted my entire professional life to. I'm not exaggerating when I say that it's worth its own book. This is a little company that by rights should have failed multiple times over. In all honesty, it was partially my amazement that it ever got off the ground in the first place that convinced me to spend a college semester learning this business. But from my involvement with Mr. Canary way back in 2012 until this moment today in 2025, I've seen new chapter after new chapter be added to this brand story. And more importantly, I've seen dozens and dozens of lives change for the better whenever this company's story has intertwined with the lives of people who come into contact with it. The Mr. Canary of 2025 looks radically different from the Mr. Canary of 1995 when we were founded. What started as a for-profit family business with a social mission commitment is today a full-blown social enterprise, wholly owned by the community organization, which once was its contracted sheltered workshop. And while I can say that we're experiencing an incredible glow-up today, the roots of our story and how this brand came about are worth knowing for anybody whose instincts tell them that little things, done for the right reason, can transform people's lives and become a source of profound purpose. So my plan today is to walk you through how an accidental business founded by two sisters just trying to make enough extra money to be able to go to the mall together somehow survived 30 years, including the Great Recession and COVID, to eventually evolve from a sheltered work contract to a full-on social enterprise, employing people with disabilities at competitive hourly rates, doing tasks that used to be only done by people without disabilities. By the end of this episode, I think you'll walk away with a much deeper appreciation for how every single time you buy a Mr. Canary bird feeder, you really do create a job. So let me start at the very beginning. Before there was a Mr. Canary brand, there was Ray Mitchell. And poetically, there was his bird feeder that came into existence twice, really, and more so on accident than on purpose. Ray Mitchell was a World War II Marine veteran who owned a small extruded plastics company in Marion, Indiana. Ray needed a better leave-behind sample for his business than just an empty plastic tube, so his secretary had the idea to turn it into a bird feeder pre-filled with birdseed so that Ray's prospective customers would actually take it home and think back to the sales call he had made every time they see the feeder or refilled it. So Ray took the idea and ran with it. Eventually, he began selling it on the side as its own little product. And so this was in 1983, and the Mr. Coffee brand had really taken off and was ubiquitous everywhere. Knowing that goldfinches, which are these little birds that most love our tube feeder, are sometimes called wild canaries, Ray named the feeder Mr. Canary as a mashup of the two phrases and trademarked it. Now, fast forward a decade plus some change to 1995, Ray Mitchell had retired and sold his business, and his bird feeder design had been sold off too. Ray's daughters, Christina and Jan, were looking for a new opportunity to work together and earn a little extra fun money to spend at the mall. So they had the harebrained idea to track down their dad's old Mr. Canary bird feeder and offer to sell it as commissioned sales agents for whoever happened to own it now. Well, they did track it down, and it had been sold off to a feed store in Lebanon, Indiana, of all places. The problem was the feed store had caught fire just a few days before, so they were preparing to go out of business. Instead of offering roles as sales reps, the feed store owner offered to sell Christina and Jan the little bit of salvageable Mr. Canary inventory that had survived the fire so they could own the brand and sell it themselves. Playing it cool, they asked for some time to think it over. The feed store owner obliged and sent them with a few cases of feeders while they thought it over. The sisters then decided to make a cold call on a big retailer to see if they could sell it in someplace. Back then, Walmart was already the largest retailer in the country, and Kmart was the second largest. Using the renowned, whichever retailer's headquarters is closest to where we live, sales strategy, the two decided to pick Kmart and made the drive. Somehow, they got a walk-in meeting with the garden center buyer that day, and Christina and Jan had scribbled some bullet points onto a Post-it note to guide their presentation, if we're being generous. They fumbled through a bunch of awkward silence during the meeting, including a moment where they had to guess what the product's wholesale cost should be, based on what they thought it should retail for, which it felt like a $5 product, so reverse engineer that and it should sell for about $2.50, right? Miraculously, this presentation ended with a commitment from the buyer to stock Mr. Canary bird feeders in about 1,800 stores on a year-round auto-replenishment basis with a 120-day lead time before the product was due in stores. It was a major sales coup that, according to the textbooks and the business practices, should have never happened. Jan and Christina were actually high-fiving in the elevator following this meeting when one of the dusty sample feeders that they had dragged with them to the presentation just totally gave out and spilled bird seed all over the elevator floor. At that moment, they realized that they had just sold a product they didn't own or know how to make at a price they'd pulled out of thin air to one of the largest retailers in the world. And that's when the reality started to set in. While both Jan and Christina had worked in social services, it was from Christina's past work with vocational rehabilitation services that she knew about an organization called CANary Services in their hometown of Marion, Indiana, which operated a sheltered workshop supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This workshop ran a bunch of odd jobs, mostly sorting and kitting parts for large local manufacturers. They used a piece rate model to pay people with disabilities who worked in the workshop as an opportunity to develop job skills and earn a paycheck. So Jan and Christina approached the CANary Services workshop team with their conundrum, asking if they could figure out how to source the necessary parts and get them assembled for Mr. Canary. To their immense credit, in just 2 weeks, they had figured out how to do exactly that. And the finished out-the-door price was exactly where Mr. Canary needed it to be to have a profitable business while honoring their thin-air pricing to Kmart. And they could do it in time to hit the required stocking date. At this point, I feel like we need to give a special shout-out to Richard Tate and Pam Brown of CANary Services, who literally pulled off the impossible by figuring out how to manufacture Mr. Canary at a large scale back before the internet was really even a thing. So while the social mission was completely unplanned, I believe that fate intervened to make it possible for Mr. Canary to become a source of opportunities for people with disabilities, which then became an integral part of Mr. Canary's DNA and purpose. As the years rolled by, Jan and Christina won a few more major sales coups, like adding Walmart and Kroger as Mr. Canary retailers. And Carry Services was were excellent manufacturing partners, scaling and keeping up with those huge bursts in growth. Jan and Chris took care of sales and marketing, and Carry Services sourced, assembled, and shipped out finished product. Jan and Chris have story after crazy story of sisters in business antics, like remodeling a house in downtown Carmel, Indiana, to serve as Mr. Canary headquarters, and then throwing a hot tub in the living room turned lobby of said headquarters. Both Jan and Chris would be quick to admit that Mr. Canary was a family business, in that order. They focused on family first, and with whatever time was left over, they did a little business. So Mr. Canary plateaued. Around 2011, Chris was ready to retire, and Jan had to decide if she wanted to continue on in business on her own. Mr. Canary hadn't started as a social mission, but by the time Jan was wrestling with whether or not to continue on in business alone, she fully understood just how work and the dignity derived from it, how much it meant to the workshop participants at Carry Services. So let me now take the unenviable task of trying to summarize who Jan Long is. Jan Mitchell Long is Ray Mitchell's youngest daughter. She was a history major who graduated from Ball State University, turned pharmaceutical sales rep, turned self-appointed hotel interior designer, turned founding director of the Indiana office of Guardian Ad Litem and CASA, turned co-founder of Mr. Canary, with a side of competitive power lifter at 5'0", 100 and nothing thrown in there too. In short, Jan Long is grounded, infinitely personable, and a not-so-subtle powerhouse, and I'm honored to call her my mentor in bird-feeding domination. Jan and I met the fall semester of 2011. Let me just say that fate intervened again and brought me kicking and screaming into the Mr. Canary story. We'll dig into that in episode number 2, but for now, suffice it to say that Jan approached her alma mater, Ball State University, where I was an entrepreneurship major at the time, to set up an interdisciplinary student team to help her chart what a path forward for Mr. Canary under her sole ownership might look like. Our student team quickly zeroed in on the impact that Jan's business was having on the lives of the workers at Carry Services. And I think it's fair to say that Jan ended that project with enough renewed belief in the social mission of the business to commit to writing Mr. Canary's next chapter at the helm alone. By the end of 2015, it was time for Mr. Canary and Carry Services to part ways, largely over the shifting cultural conversations about whether or not sheltered work and its piece rate pay model was a fair model for supporting workers with disabilities. By this time, I'd graduated college and was working for Mr. Canary full-time, and Jan and I interviewed potential new manufacturing partners to replace Carry Services. One organization in particular, the ARC of Greater Boone County, made clear its commitment to offer on-site work opportunities to the people they supported. And they were led by Andy Kirby, who had been a leader on the Carry Services team for a few years. Andy was intimately familiar with Mr. Canary and put in a strong bid to win Mr. Canary's business. So we moved our manufacturing operations from Marion, Indiana to Lebanon, Indiana in 2016. Once Mr. Canary's manufacturing operations were up and running at the ARC of Greater Boone County, things settled into a new pattern of Jan and I working together, boomer and millennial, to make a big splash to become a 25-year overnight success story in the world of bird feeding. And while we always seem to be just on the cusp of breaking out, it ultimately never happened. By 2023, Jan was ready to retire. I'm not sure that someone as dynamic as Jan Long ever really retires the way that people like you and I do, but she was ready to at least have that as an option. So she began weighing her options to exit the company she'd given nearly 28 years of her life to build. Naturally, the best option for everybody involved was if the ARC of Greater Boone County, Mr. Canary's manufacturing partner, would acquire the brand. Then Jan could know for certain that the company's social mission would continue past her retirement. See, if Mr. Canary had sold out to one of our corporate competitors, Soulless corporate math would have almost certainly advocated for just absorbing Mr. Canary's shelf space and rolling all operations over to whatever that corporation had going, which by and large is foreign-made products which are imported to the U.S., especially at Mr. Canary's price points. Thankfully, Pam Verbarg, who took over leadership of the ARC of Greater Boone County from Andy Kirby, has a rock-solid commitment to both the importance of on-site work services for people with disabilities and to entrepreneurship as a source of sustainability for disability service providers. So Pam jumped at the opportunity to buy Mr. Canary, and thankfully, the ARC's board of directors jumped with her. So in October of 2023, the ARC of Greater Boone County officially acquired the Mr. Canary brand and started writing a wild new chapter in the Mr. Canary story. If you haven't figured it out already, I came along for the ride, transferring my employment from the private entity behind Mr. Canary, which then was called Mitchell Marketing Group, to now serving as the director of Main Street Marketing Enterprises, which was the brand new for-profit social enterprise wholly owned by the ARC of Greater Boone County. Shortly after my peculiar onboarding period, where I was the most inside outsider, finally coming on board officially to the team, Pam shared her vision to use Mr. Canary as a vehicle to transform the ARC of Greater Boone County's sheltered workshop into a competitively paid direct employer of the people the ARC supports. To be clear, this was no small undertaking. We're talking about reshaping a sheltered workshop labor model that's been around since the 1970s. Critics of that sheltered workshop model point out that too many people land in sheltered work, and because of the way it's structured, they quickly plateau in their skills and performance and never end up building up to a point where they're able to transfer to community integrated employment in a way where they can be successful. Under our 14C sheltered work program, only 19% of our team had demonstrated the ability to produce at an efficiency greater than 50%, which is a decent benchmark for showing readiness for community integrated employment. Adding to the complexity of this old sheltered workshop model was the reality that we had 4 dozen sheltered workshop participants who were used to showing up or not showing up whenever they wanted, leaving whenever they wanted, and setting their own work pace. On top of that, our existing staff for Mr. Canary was made up of direct support professionals who had been trained to hit just-in-time production orders while ensuring a safe environment for the workshop participants. They had no training in how to analyze and hack the job aptitudes of the various individuals we support. So those were the challenges on the workshop side of the equation. On the Mr. Canary business side of the equation, we had an established business, which means we had established pricing and established costing. We couldn't just pass along any and every cost associated with transforming our business model. So essentially, the challenge was this: make the same bird feeders using the same crew in a more efficient way while elevating the work performance of every single worker with disabilities that we employ. If we couldn't pull that off, then the business would fail. We will dive into the nitty-gritty of how that all played out in a future episode, I promise you. So that's a 10,000-foot view of the Mr. Canary story. Now, don't fret, I've barely scratched the surface today of all the different nuggets worth talking about. But I hope that this episode's given you a feel that this podcast is here because stories like ours, stories about dignity, belonging, and work that matters, deserve to be told. I can think of no better way to celebrate Mr. Canary's 30th birthday than by sharing our coming of age with all of you. Going forward, here's what that's going to look like. For many of our episodes, I'm going to hand the mic over to our employees and let them share their stories with you. They'll explain in their own words what they've experienced in their lives as people with disabilities. In particular, what challenges and blessings they've experienced with employment. Beyond that, though, they'll share their thoughts about what it means to truly belong, what inclusion looks like, and how meaningful work is a conduit for personal pride and dignity. We're also going to use some episodes to shine a light on the partnerships and communities outside of our walls, which amplify Mr. Canary's values and support our ability to make an impact. Some episodes are going to discuss how the simple little rituals in our lives often make up our most treasured memories and connect us with those we love. And we'll talk about how we can hold fast to those rituals in a world that only seems to spin faster and faster. Finally, we'll share episodes that reveal how Mr. Canary operates as a mission-first business. The decisions, challenges, trade-offs, values, and leadership philosophy that shape our social enterprise, committed to dignity, inclusion, and American manufacturing. Next time in episode number 2, I'll pull back the curtain on how I found myself in this unexpected role of bird-feeding kingpin, and why it feels like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Thank you for joining me for this opening episode of the Canary Cast. Do me a favor, whichever platform you're listening to this podcast on, comment, like, and subscribe to receive notifications every time we drop a new episode. That will help more people discover this podcast. Also, if you know someone who connects with our story, share this episode with them so that we can build a community and multiply our impact. We'll have links in the details of this episode to our website, the Arc of Greater Boone County's website, and to our social media accounts, so you can follow us there too. And remember, buy a feeder, create a job. See you next time.